My first conscious encounter with money occurred at the age of 7, when I watched my mother cry over the kitchen table, counting crumpled bills and coins. It wasn't enough to pay the bills. At the time, I didn't understand the full complexity of their financial situation, but I understood one thing: money is water. Without it, everything living in your little world begins to wither and dry up. And I promised myself that one day I would have my own, inexhaustible ocean. I've always been good at math. For me, numbers weren't dry symbols. They were alive, they sang, formed elegant patterns, and told stories. I saw harmony in logarithms and poetry in differential equations. This gift led me to Cambridge, and then to the doorstep of the most prestigious hedge fund in the City of London, Thorn Capital. A place where young geniuses, armed with algorithms and outrageous ambitions, turned theoretical mathematics into very real, crisp money. I came there as an idealist. I believed in the efficiency of the market, in the purity of numbers. I thought I'd simply be solving complex puzzles, and money would be a pleasant side effect, a measure of my intelligence. I didn't realize I was going to work not in a temple of logic, but in a casino, where the stakes were human destinies, and the croupiers were people with icy eyes and dead souls. My guide into this world was its founder, Marcus Thorne. He was a legend. A man who could look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average and see in it not just a curve, but a symphony of human greed and fear. He saw in me more than just a talented analyst. He saw in me a rare, raw resource. He saw hunger, the same hunger I felt at the age of 7 at the kitchen table. And he decided to turn me from a starving person into a predator. This story isn't about how I made my first millions. This is about what I paid for them. London greeted me with the smell of wet asphalt and promise. Thorn Capital's office was located on the top floors of a glass skyscraper everyone called the Shard. Image of the Shard in London from there, the city seemed like a toy, a diagram, a collection of data to be analyzed and predicted. It was calming. My first interview with Marcus Thorne lasted 7 minutes. He didn't ask me about my studies. He handed me a sheet of paper with a stock chart of an obscure tech company and said, "Sing me this song." I stared at the seemingly chaotic peaks and troughs, and suddenly I heard it. I saw a hidden cycle, a repeating pattern masked by market noise. "It's not a song," I said. "It's a waltz. 3 steps up, 1 down." The cycle repeats every 4 months, but each time the amplitude decreases. It fades. The company is dying, but it's trying to pretend to dance. Marcus silently took the paper from me. "You've been hired. Your probationary period is 3 months. Your task is to find these waltzes for me." The first months were like a dream. I worked 18 hours a day, fueled by adrenaline and coffee. I immersed myself in a world of numbers. I built models that predicted bankruptcies, acquisitions, booms and busts. And my models worked. My first bonus was more than my mother earned in 5 years. I paid off her mortgage in a single transfer. That evening, she called me and, for the first time in many years, cried not from grief, but from happiness. I felt omnipotent. I had conquered poverty. I made water flow in my family's desert. At the same time, Julian appeared in my life. He was my complete opposite. He was a violist, playing in a small string quartet. His world was not made of numbers, but of sounds. His hands smelled of rosin, not the hand sanitizer from the office dispenser. We met in a small coffee shop where I was trying to work and he was trying to read a score. He said I stared at my laptop with the same intensity he stared at a Brahms score. Julian became my anchor, my connection to a world where value wasn't measured in pounds sterling. He took me to concerts in small churches where the acoustics were divine. He taught me to listen to the silence between the notes. He said it was as meaningful as the sounds themselves. Our worlds were different, but we found common harmony. His music calmed the chaos of numbers in my head. He was my only secret from Marcus. Marcus disapproved of attachments. He said they were a variable that introduced noise into any model. My probationary period was coming to an end. Marcus called me into his office. It resembled the bridge of a spaceship, with panoramic windows and dozens of monitors. "You're good at finding waltzes, Ava," he said. "But you're only listening. It's time to learn how to conduct." He showed me data on a small pharmaceutical company. They were on the verge of launching a new migraine drug. All the analysts were predicting explosive growth. "Find the crack," Marcus ordered. I dug into the data. Reports, studies, statistics. And I found it. A small, almost imperceptible anomaly in the Phase 3 clinical trials. A tiny percentage of subjects had a rare but serious side effect, which the company had skillfully masked in the general data stream. If this information came to light, their stock would collapse. I brought my findings to Marcus. He looked at me with his cold eyes. "Good. Now we're going short. We're betting on 'em to fall." "But that's unethical," I stammered. "We have to notify the regulators." Marcus laughed. A quiet, dry laugh. "Baby, we're not the Red Cross. We're Thorn Capital. Our job is to use information. And ethics is a luxury reserved for those who've already made their billions. Are you with us?" I looked at him, at the London skyline behind him, at the figures for my potential bonus flashing on one of the monitors. And I remembered my mother's tear-stained face. "Yes," I said. A week later, an anonymous source, hired by Marcus, leaked information about the side effects to the press. The company's shares plummeted by 80%. Thorn Capital made £200 million in a single day. My bonus was $2 million. I bought myself a flat in Notting Hill, with high ceilings and windows overlooking the garden. That evening, I took Julian there. I opened a bottle of vintage champagne. "We must celebrate," I said. "I can now buy you that Guarneri viola violin you've been dreaming of." He looked at me, and there was no joy in his eyes. "At what cost, Ava?" "I read the news today. That company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs." "It's the market, Julian," I replied, surprised at how cold my voice sounded. "Survival of the fittest. I just did my job." "Your job is to destroy?" "My job is to analyze. I see the cracks. I don't create them." That evening, the first real rift appeared between us. He didn't understand my triumph. And I didn't understand his reproaches. I looked at my beautiful new apartment, at the bubbles in my glass, and for the first time I felt that my ocean might be cold and lonely. I became a star at Thorn Capital. Marcus gave me my own team and nearly unlimited resources. My hunger grew. The thrill of predicting decline was greater than the thrill of predicting growth. Destruction was easier and faster than creation. And more profitable. One day, Marcus called me and showed me a new target. It wasn't a giant corporation, but a small family-owned company in Scotland developing innovative wind turbines. They had created a unique technology that could revolutionize green energy. They were led by an old engineer, almost a genius, who had invested his entire life and the lives of his family in this company. They're looking for an investor to launch mass production, Marcus said. Their patent is worth billions. But the company itself is weak. Debt, poor management. It's like ripe fruit on a thin branch. Will we invest in them? I asked. No. Marcus smiled. We'll eat them. I want their patent. But I don't want to pay for it. Your job is to drive their price down to zero. Create panic. Destroy their reputation. And when they're on the brink of bankruptcy, we'll buy them for their debts. Or rather, not us, but our shell company. This wasn't just information exploitation anymore. This was sabotage. A plan to deliberately destroy a healthy, promising company. This was theft. Stealing a future, stealing a dream. It's risky, I said, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. If we get caught, we won't be caught, Marcus interrupted. Because you'll do everything perfectly. Or do you want to go back to that kitchen table where your mother cried? He hit me where it hurt most. And I gave in again. My team began working. We were like a pack of wolves chasing a deer. We found their every weakness and attacked it. I hired journalists to write commissioned articles about the instability of their turbines. I hacked their internal correspondence and found evidence of routine production problems that we inflated into disaster proportions. We planted rumors on the stock exchange, creating panic among their few shareholders. I became a machine. I slept 4 hours a night. I stopped seeing Julian. He called, but I didn't answer. What could I tell him? That I was busy destroying some old Scottish engineer's life's work? One day, he came to my office. He broke through security. He entered my glass office and froze. My monitors were filled with graphs, tables, news feeds with screaming headlines that I had created myself. So this is what your work looks like, he said quietly. You sit here in your tower, pulling strings, while somewhere out there, real lives are crumbling. Go away, Julian, I said, not turning to face him. You don't understand. Oh, I understand, Ava. I looked at you and thought you were fighting a dragon. And you became one yourself. He placed the key to my apartment on my desk. I can't live in a castle built on bones. And he left. I heard his footsteps fade in the hallway. I stared at the key lying on the glossy surface of the desk. It seemed like an artifact from another, long-forgotten life. I swept it into the trash can and returned to my graphs. But for some reason, the numbers were blurry. A month later, the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Investors fled. Banks were demanding repayment of loans. The elderly engineer, its founder, was hospitalized with a heart attack. That day, Marcus's shell company bought their patent for 1/100th of its real value. The operation was complete. Marcus threw a party on the roof of the Shard. Champagne flowed freely. Everyone congratulated me. I was the queen of this feast for vultures. Marcus came up to me and handed me a check. My bonus. £10 million. You've exceeded my expectations, Ava, he said. You're a true predator. I stared at the check. 10 million. I could buy myself an island. I could never work again. But when I looked up, I saw my reflection in the glass wall. A woman with cold, empty eyes stared back at me. She was alone. And she looked very much like Marcus Thorne. I became a partner at Thorne Capital. I moved into a penthouse with a view of London. I had everything I'd dreamed of as a child. My ocean of money was deep and calm. But I couldn't swim in it. I was suffocating. Luxury had lost its flavor. Michelin-starred restaurants were tasteless. Designer clothes felt like prison uniforms. I was surrounded by people, but I was infinitely alone. I tried to start new relationships, but all the men saw in me were my bank account. I realized Julian was the only one who saw the real me. The girl I'd killed. I tried to drown out the emptiness with work. I became even tougher, even more cynical. My name was spoken in the city with a mixture of fear and admiration. I was a money-making machine. At night, I dreamed of the old Scottish engineer. He said nothing, just looked at me with silent reproach. Marcus decided we were ready for the biggest hunt in our history. Our target wasn't a company, but an entire country. A small, economically weak state in South America, whose currency was vulnerable. The plan was simple and monstrous. Crash their national currency with a coordinated attack, then buy up their devalued assets, ports, power plants, oil fields. This isn't just money, Ava, Marcus said, his eyes blazing. This is power. We will become the shadow government of this country. This wasn't theft anymore. This was economic terrorism. It meant plunging millions of people into poverty. Condemning them to hunger and chaos. We can't do this, I said. This is evil. Evil? Good? Marcus chuckled. These are childish categories, Ava. There are only the strong and the weak. Predators and prey. Who do you want to be? Back at that kitchen table? Or sit with me on top of the world? I knew I should have said no. Walked out, slamming the door. But I couldn't. The hunger he'd instilled in me was too strong. The fear of being poor, weak, and crying at the kitchen table again paralyzed my will. And so I began to devise a plan of attack. The attack was scheduled for Monday. Over the weekend, I sat alone in my penthouse, in complete silence. I looked out over London at night. The city of lights, the city of money, the city of loneliness. And I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't press that red button. The dragon I had become looked in the mirror and saw a small, frightened girl inside. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office. Everyone was on edge, anticipating the carnage. Marcus was waiting in his office. Is everything ready? He asked. Yes, I replied. Everything is ready. I handed him the flash drive. All the algorithms and entry points are here. You can begin without me. I'm leaving. He looked at me with bewilderment, which turned to anger. What? You can't leave. Not now. I can. And I am leaving, I said. I don't want to sit on top of the world with you, Marcus. It's too cold and lonely there. I turned and headed for the exit. I expected shouts and threats. But he remained silent. When I was already at the door, he said quietly, You already pressed the button anyway, Ava. The day you agreed to work for me. I left. I walked out of the Shard and, for the first time in years, took a deep breath of ordinary London air, scented with rain and exhaust fumes. It smelled like the most wonderful scent in the world. I knew Marcus would launch an attack without me. And I knew I had to stop him. Not for that distant country. For myself. I went to the nearest internet cafe. And I did what I did best. I used the information. I anonymously sent all the details of the planned attack, all the evidence, all the names and schemes I knew, to the Financial Conduct Authority, the Wall Street Journal, and the Guardian. I included one sentence. Sometimes the silence between the notes needs to be filled with truth. The biggest financial scandal of the decade had erupted. Thorn Capital was destroyed. Marcus was arrested. I, as the chief architect of their operations, was wanted. I lost everything. My accounts were frozen, my reputation was destroyed. I became a pariah. After a long trial, where I was the prosecution's star witness, I was given a suspended sentence. 5 years have passed. I live in a small town on the coast of Ireland. I teach math at a local school. I earn just enough to pay the rent on a tiny apartment and buy food. I have a kitchen table again, and sometimes, at the end of the month, I have to count the coins. But I don't cry anymore. I never tried to find Julian. I didn't deserve him. But one day, walking home from school, I heard the sounds of a viola. The melody came from the open window of an old pub. It was a sad but bright melody, the likes of which I had never heard before. I peered through the window. He was sitting at a table, viola in hand. He was alone. He wasn't playing for an audience. He was playing for himself. Our eyes met. He paused playing. He looked at me for several long, endless seconds. There was no reproach or anger in his gaze. Only sadness and recognition. He picked up his instrument and began playing again. But this time it was a different melody. The one he played for me at the very beginning, in small London churches. I stopped at the threshold of the pub. I didn't know if I could enter. I didn't know if I had the right to. But I knew one thing. My ocean of money had turned out to be a salty, dead desert. But real water, living, pure, was here. In his music. In the silence between the notes. And I took the first step to quench my thirst.